Oh,
Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. This is the first webinar of the fall season for the Community College Consortium for OER, which is a part of Open Education Global. I'm Heather Blicker, and I'm the director of CCCOER, and I'm really excited to kick off our first webinar with a collaboration with Pressbooks to focus on vocational publishing. So really quickly, I just want to give a bit of context. In skill-based, hands-on fields like welding, I know from experience as a librarian supporting vocational subjects that creating OER is both an opportunity and a challenge. Unlike general education subjects, as I know you're probably all aware, open materials are often limited, so you have to start from the ground up in many cases. Many instructors are adjuncts without the extra time or support to work on these projects, and proprietary resources can restrict access. So that's why today just feels so special. We'll be highlighting the development of what we believe is the first ever open welding textbook. So with that, I'm very much looking forward to hearing from our presenters today, and I'll hand it over to our collaborator, Jen.
thank you, Heather. As mentioned, I'm Jen. I'm from Pressbooks. And for those of you very quickly on the call who might not know who we are at Pressbooks or what we are a digital publishing platform that higher education institutions use to create, share, adapt a variety of digital content, including textbooks like the one that you will see today. Or I guess nothing's quite like what you'll see today because as Heather mentioned, this is the first of its kind. So that's very exciting. And honestly, that's what this series is really about. Pressbooks and OEGlobal partnered for this OER Under the Hood series to really showcase the unique and groundbreaking things that people are doing in this community. I feel like every day I see a cool new project. I'm like, oh, I had no idea you could do that in Pressbooks. Like, I wouldn't think of that. So thank you so much, panelists, for joining us. Before I hand it over to Alan and the panelists, just a few housekeeping notes that I have as sort of the Zoom admin of this session. The chat is open and I can see some of you have already started introducing yourselves, so that's great. Please feel free, let us know who you are, where you're joining from, and feel free to chat amongst each other during the session. I would just ask that if you have questions for the panelists or Alan or Heather or myself, please use the Q&A for that. That'll just be easier for us to keep on top of and make sure that we're doing our best to answer your questions either throughout the session or the few minutes that we'll have dedicated for Q&A at the end. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Alan, and I'll see you all at the end of the session.
okay. And hello, and everybody. Great to be here in the big crowd. And thank you, Heather and CCCOER, for collaborating with us on this. I'm Alan Levine from OEGlobal, and I hope to stop talking soon because we really want to get to the welding. But really want to thank Jen and the Pressbooks team for working with us on the series. Blame me for the under the hood metaphor, and I'm not a car mechanic at all, but I just know how much you see people. It just happened where I live last weekend. There was a big car show downtown, and people were gathered with their classic cars, most of them with their hoods up. And so, what happens is like, wow, that car looks great. That Pressbooks looks so great. Look at that paint job. Look at the interior. And then you get interested, like, how does that work? And so the gathering of people around something like a car kind of felt like a good metaphor for talking about OER because we want to look at them from the outside. Somebody says they can't hear. Just checking.
I can hear
Um,
you great, Alan. Is anybody else having?
Okay. Okay. Good, good, because I'm blabbing, but that happens. And I always say technology generally lets us down when we need to, but we keep going. Anyhow, the whole idea is to take a look at a unique and interesting press book and talk to the people who helped create it and learn the inside story and just have a poke around. For someone who asked about the sharing of slides, we don't do too many slides. The whole point here, we're going to do some live demos and you're going to see the press book itself as we talk about it, but we will share the whole recording. With that, I think it's time to introduce our guests because they've been waiting patiently. And I'm going to turn it over for them to introduce themselves. And I'll start first with Douglas Rupick. Great to have you here, Doug. And tell us about welding.
Oh, thank you. It is exciting to be here, and exciting is a euphemism for terrified, of course. Um, but happy to be here. I teach welding at South Seattle College. I'm a journeyman iron worker. I'm a certified welder, certified welding inspector. My Master of Education degree is focused in instructional design, and I've been teaching in the field of welding for 15 years or so. But that's who I am. And I teach welding. That's what I do. And I'm glad to be here this morning. And I'll talk more later, I'm assuming.
Great. And then over to David Kolomenko, who's also a welder and part of this book.
Hi, I'm David Colomecco. I've been teaching at Everett Community College for about 5 years. I'm an engineer during the day, and I took a year of classes for enrichment in welding. I've always been interested in welding. And at the school, there was someone who was an instructor that was retiring, and he asked me to teach the metallurgy courses to take over for what he was doing. And I've really enjoyed working with the students. And this book is another great way to kind of get information out there to help students with the topic. I'm a CWI. I'm also wrapping up a welding engineering master's this semester. And it was just really great to work with everyone on the team.
Excellent. And then last, definitely not least, is Ashley Montenegro Ramirez. And we're glad to have someone from the ProfTech team that helps support this. And you're going to hear as this unfolds, just like what an impressive project this was for how it was designed. Welcome, Ashley.
Hello, my name is Ashley Montenegro Ramirez, and I am one of the project managers here at the State Board for Open ProfTech. Super excited for everyone to see the welding textbook. I am not a welder, just a project manager.
Excellent. So, if someone who's doing screen sharing, maybe we should just open up and see the cover of the book as we do a little bit of intro. But first of all, I'm really curious to ask because I want to think about because both Doug and David, I mean, they are welders. They come from the field, and I was curious as we first started like learning about this title is like for both of you, like how was welding taught when you came up and in the early years of your teaching? Like what was the way that welding was taught? Uh, Either maybe Doug, you could.
So yeah, I went to welding school after I got my first bachelor's degree. I went to welding school so I could get a job, so I could pay for grad school. So I signed up for school, and the textbook was a hardcover textbook. It was at my point in my life, it was a huge expense. So I showed up for school the first day with my textbook, and the instructor said, "Oh, it's good that you got the textbook, but we're not going to be in the classroom. We're only going to be in the lab. So don't, just hang on to the textbook, whatever." And so they just taught us hands-on in the lab without a whole lot of structure. Just, once you get good at this, we'll show you something else. And I did that for a couple of quarters and then was off with my career. I'm hoping that contemporary or, this present day's welding instruction is done a lot more efficiently, a lot more structured. Um, as a career welder, I've read through my welding textbook probably 3 times cover to cover, but I think it should have been covered a lot better when I was in school, and I know that we covered a lot better nowadays where I'm teaching, and I know where David's teaching as well.
Excellent. And can maybe David, you can chime in too, like just the scope of like what is it like the teaching welding to me, I would think involves a lot of hands-on. And so what, where does the textbook, play into that, into the whole realm of the experience of these courses?
Yeah, so Everett Community College is a little different, and I've had conversations with Doug about this, in that we have more lecture courses off to the side. And so I mentioned earlier that I was doing the metallurgy courses. So we have 3 classes. We have one on, ferrous, a middle one that's more on like procedures, and then one on like non-ferrous materials. And so this book, or at least would kind of help with that. But really, like the way that we design those courses is to try to pull discussion or learning from the weld lab, like lectures, to get into other classes so we can go into more depth and give students more time to actually weld in the welding labs. And so, uh, with what Doug said in terms of things being more structured, I know the whole team, we worked on, how to structure this really well, and then how do we really connect with the students. And so Doug even had a great idea of bringing in stories of other welders and people out in industry, so students could kind of connect what they were doing in the welding labs and in the classes with what they'll eventually do in industry, or different opportunities that they have out in industry. I think that
Excellent.
answers your question. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
of course. It's all interesting, and maybe if you don't mind, Doug, if we could flip through some pages so people can get an idea of the book, but maybe
Sure,
just
glad
like,
to.
yeah, like, and as we do this, because it's really helpful to get a feel, because the structure of the book is very well designed, and the amount of media in there is really part of its strength. But can we hear, as if you can talk while you flip, like
Yes.
the genesis of the project, and sort of like how it's come to be in this form that we see it?
Okay, so yeah, here's once you go to the website, this is the cover, and of course you'll click on read book. Contents are over here on the left-hand side. So I'm gonna expand this. So each of the chapters has subchapters, or sections, I guess you could call them. And you can go right to the section just like you have a physical copy of the book. So when we got involved, it's a little over 2 years, pushing 3 years now, that we were contacted and said, hey, would you like to work on this book? And me, Dave, 4 or 5 other welding instructors said, yeah, we'll work on this. So we brainstormed, we figured out what topics we should cover, and then we divvied up who would do what. So even though we worked as a team, we were basically working on our own portions of the project and meeting on a monthly basis. So, as you go to the first, let's see, make sure, okay, introduction. So the introduction is a pretty important part of the book. It has an overview of what the chapter is going to cover. It's got different objectives. So the student ideally is going to read the introduction and gonna read the objectives and try and figure out, okay, what am I going to need to get from this as I read it? There's also key terms, or glossary terms. So a student should ideally look at these and say, okay, these are words that are important. These are things I'm going to have to look out for. Then at the bottom, there's a link that you can go to the next page, as well as the navigation on the left-hand side. And then, we've got our illustrations in here. Each one of these illustrations has an alt text. So if a student is using screen reader technology, the screen reader will say, okay, this is a picture of a hippie looking dude that is hammering something out on an anvil. Let's see. Forgive me, Ashley, how do I access the alt text? Is that something I can do without a screen reader?
You could do it with code, and I believe it's Control I or something like that,
Control I.
or Control K.
I don't know what, I don't have a screen reader, so it's not, because I can read, I can see it, and so it's not something that I need to do. So okay, we'll move on. And then it's another neat feature is each one of the vocabulary words or key terms in the text is something that you can toggle on, and it's an active link to the vocabulary. There are H5P questions throughout the text. So you can see people who had the use of something had an advantage over those that didn't, were more likely. People who had the use of cell phones. Okay, cell phones. And I'll check my answer, and no, I'm wrong. Okay, I'm a horrible person. So it's got a little hint in there, you know, that's not quite right. Remember, this material replaced wood, bone, stone. Try again. So I'm going to try it again. And I'm going to type in metals because that's what the text says. Check it, and oh yes, great job. I get a gold star. Um, Gives me that dopamine rush. Means a lot to me. So each chapter is divided into sections like this. It has the call outs, or it has the not the call outs, the vocabulary words. It's got the H5P questions. It's got the illustrations with the alt text for screen readers. It's got a variety of types of questions. Let's see, I think there is a call out here. You mentioned stories of other welders. I think Dave mentioned that. Dave, you said that was a good idea I had. No, all of my good ideas are stolen ideas. Okay. But yeah, this is April. Selsta Finkbonner is an iron worker. She wrote this essay about how she got into welding, and we included a couple of these in the textbook to help students and readers to get connected in a personal connection to it. Anything else I can show you? I don't want to take too much time. I know we got a lot to cover.
That's okay, and we're going to ask you to share some of your favorite chapters. I just want to comment the use of H5P is, as I'm really impressed with that, because it's really just to help students practice as they're going, not sort of in the assessment type bit. Do you hear from students about how that helps them?
Um, I haven't started using the textbook, just went public within the last month.
Oh, of course.
So I've been working this summer to build a curriculum around it that I can use in my classroom. I have shown a couple of students the textbook, and they were very impressed with it. I don't know how much we can talk about this, but it has been used in kind of like beta testing in some high schools in the state, and it's been very successful and well received. But I don't think that we've seen the we haven't seen the full impact of it yet. I'm excited to start using it here in the near future, and I'm pretty optimistic about how it's going to go.
And also still you have at the end of the chapters, there's practice questions with the answers in the back, it's kind of old school, but it's still really effective.
It is, yeah. And the questions that we wrote, we wanted to avoid just rote memorization and fill in the blank stuff. We want to build comprehension and understanding in how our students are working with this. So we wanted to have questions that were centered, based in the text, but would require a level of thought and comprehension in order to answer them. So, but yeah, at the conclusion of each chapter, we do have review questions. And we also have, this isn't part of Pressbooks, but I'll throw it out there. We've also built a quiz bank, item banks of quiz questions that people that use this text can download. Hopefully not the students can download it, but the instructors can download it. So, and I'm sure Ashley can address that if she so chooses.
Actually, I want to jump in here and say we had an accessibility specialist talk about how to in the chat how to actually view the alt text, and Ashley responded.
Okay.
Also, Ashley, would you mind telling, just for the recording's sake, how we can check the alt text?
Yeah, you can Doug, can you go to that image and right click it?
Okay, right click. Okay.
Yeah, and you
that
can
side.
click inspect, or you could do Control Shift I if you're going through the entire textbook. And then
Okay.
it pops up right there. And then we had a quality assurance person go through the entire textbook to ensure that all the images had adequate alt text. So all of the images have been checked on, and there's been so many eyes on this textbook to get to where we are right now. And then the chat, I will share the
Here it
Canvas
is.
Commons link as well, which is where you can go to fill out a form to get the test questions because we just want to make sure that they're accessible to only instructors and not students. So we are doing our due diligence to double check that only verified instructors or instructional designers or librarians will have access to those questions. And there are about 30 questions per chapter. So we have 21 chapters, so you can imagine how many that is.
Yes,
Thank you
it was
so
a bit of work.
much. Yeah. Yeah, and that's so important to mention along with the accessibility about the test bank access. It can be a topic for sure that comes up a lot. So, but before I ask David to share some of his favorite sections or chapters in the text, I guess I'm wondering. I remember you showing us a diagram of a welding gun and talking about how the students have the image and then they move to the welding lab to work hands-on. And I was wondering if you could tell us about that.
Oh, sure.
And maybe if you remember where that is located in the book, if you could share the screen and pull that up. Because
Yes.
I guess specifically, I'm wondering, uh, was it challenging to translate, hands-on physical tasks or tools into the written form?
I know that as a team, we had a lot of discussions and, Doug, I can't remember if you were doing the PPE and tools or some of those earlier chapters there, but really, I know the most important thing was to make this book as visual as possible because welders are visual learners typically. And so having images, especially, uh, we have some students that have never worked with tools before. And so to have them be able to see what the different tools are, and especially that image that, let me find that, that's in this chapter 9 for gas shielded and flux core. So I guess for everyone here, so if we kind of just briefly look at, Doug was going over the intro. So we cover like physical hazards, PPE, equipment safety. So, for the welding labs that we teach and probably for everyone, you go over safety in the beginning. And so that was really important for us to have that in the book. So, especially again, students who've never used tools, they're well aware of what's expected and how dangerous, these tools can be if they're not used properly. Because you have high energy, electricity, sometimes at high voltages. I know, I think at Everett Community College, we're using like 480 volts on the back end. And then you have compressed gases that can explode, things like that. So all that safety is covered there. And then we get into the different processes here. And so with gas shielded and flux cord welding here, if we go to the equipment and setup. So within all of these, we kind of had like a history, uh, because that kind of helps out with, because I know some students will have questions, about, oh, well, why does this industry, use stick? Like, why aren't they using, flux core? Why do some use this or that? So we try to kind of give some background on that as well. And then to Heather's question. So we had the team and the state board had commissioned an artist, so that way the images would all look very similar. They would have a nice flow. So a lot of work went into the flow and how things look here to kind of help the students move through the text. And then one thing Doug had mentioned was that it's one thing to look at a cartoon like this, and this is very helpful for a student to see, okay, here's like the different pieces. But then when you're actually out in a welding lab or a fabrication shop itself, it looks very different. So we have a lot of other pieces of equipment and other things there. So for them to be able to kind of look here, go through the text, see the different pieces, and then, oh, okay, this is what it looks like. And I can see, what's there on the shop floor, but I'm also going to see a bunch of other things that, can be kind of tangled in there as well. Um, so we go over the equipment and then again, more H5P questions on the power supplies. And then down here for the equipment that students are going to be uh, working with, like these consumable types, like the gas nozzle and other things that need to be replaced, or the student needs to take apart to kind of make sure that from spatter and just other things. Like when you're welding, you're going to get a lot of like metal, flying back and other things, and it'll actually get inside of here. So, as students are welding, they're going to need to be able to check that to make sure there's proper gas flow and things like that. So here's just an image of what it would actually look like that we took. And then down here, kind of not really an exploded view, but a view of what all these different parts and pieces are, because these over time, these are going to wear out, they're going to get deformed, um, and they'll need to be replaced. And so students will have to go, to their instructor and say, hey, I need a new, uh, gas cup, or I need, this, that, or the other. So it was really important for us to show this. So go into like the classroom or how it's taught in the lab. I think ideally kind of using a word Doug is using, that the students would read ahead of time. We know that, some of them may not do that, but they have the opportunity to see this, and then, outside of the classroom or outside of the lab, and then they can come in, the instructor can kind of go over, hey, here's a welding gun, this is how the process works. They'll do an example weld. And I think back, just just being a student, you're like, okay, yeah, this sounds good and all, and then you go to your booth for the first time and you're like, oh wait, what? And so here we have this exploded view that kind of helps with that. And then they also have other resources. I know when I was doing TIG welding, I was using YouTube to watch a video on how to put together the torch and things like that. So
Hmm.
um yeah, so we really try to set it up as like an aid for the not only the in-person with what the welding instructor is doing, but if a student is trying to catch up on something, or maybe it's been a while since they've done something like this and they just kind of want to check real quick. Yeah.
Nice.
And so
I
what,
don't know.
what did it take to, I mean, we're seeing the outside of the car here. Like, what did it take to start from saying we need this chapter on, I can't remember, core fluxed welding? Um, like
Yeah.
what?
So we had a lot of discussions, and Doug, definitely jump in here, uh, where we, so I think like there was a discussion about like how much do we want to put in the book. And there were some instructors who were like, as we were kind of laying out an outline, they were saying, oh, this is too much. But I think like the group, the way we designed this was that it's almost like a buffet. You can kind of take what you want. And so if there's certain pieces of the book that you're not going to cover. So if there's a process you're not covering, you don't have to cover that chapter. And so that should hopefully help. So even though the book is, 900 pages plus, you can pick and choose. And we also, like, if we kind of look at just the way that it's written, we wrote it just overall so it's very accessible from students. And I think that's why it's had so far such a positive um, uh, review or acceptance by students, that students like it, because we really were focusing uh, on the students, and questions they may have had, or just our experience with students, and really just trying to meet their needs for getting them from, because every student, every person starts at zero. So even if someone was welding before they go to school, they started from zero at one point. And so to kind of get them from zero to where they need to be when they go out in industry.
And the I like the chapter structure. They don't go on forever. Like sometimes you see some, I mean, not to criticize, but some textbooks have some really long, in-depth chapters, and the chunking and the pacing work very well. So compliments to the design for that.
Hey, and I just want to point out that in the chat we've got some interesting comments. We have someone that says, student feedback to OER really supports what you're saying, David. They like the images from the shop floor. They really appreciate those. And then there was an interesting question that I think is really, it'll be good to throw it out to you, especially David, since you were a student not too long ago. Um, so what would a welding teacher say to another welding teacher to get them to look at this textbook? Because this person, it wants to introduce this textbook to the welding instructors, but do a little bit more than just saying, hey, this exists. Like how do we get them interested?
So I think just overall, like the all the um for lack of better, like the product, like what we're delivering. So we're delivering not only a book that's free. So we have, a lot of our students, they are on financial aid, or if they're not, the cost of books can be a barrier to them. So having a book that they can look at, and I know Doug has said that it's really easy, as students say, like looking at it on a phone, so it's accessible like all the way around. And then also we have the Canvas shell that we had put together. So there's a lot there. And then I would say most importantly, and Ashley, I don't know if you can comment on this, but from an initial test or initial run through with the book, the students' grades had gone up. And so I think, it's one thing for us to say, yeah, this is great, but I think the data, or the feedback from those students. Yeah, Ashley, if you could mention that or something.
Yeah, Dr. Boyoung Shea put in the chat what we found during the pilot that we ran last fall, a year ago. Um, the GPA increased from approximately 2.6 to 3.9, and that's honestly unheard of. Um, and they were taught by the same instructor, and it was really amazing to see just the improvement of the grades. And this is a very big textbook. There's a lot that you can read. We actually got it printed as well, to see what it would look like for those students, because it was taught at a skill center here in
Look,
Washington.
look,
Yeah, yeah.
Douglas has a print copy. It's huge.
Share it
It's
like this so they
beautiful.
can see
Yeah,
how
this
much
is
there is.
it is if you need building materials, these will do. They're 1,000 pages
Yeah,
ish.
everything you'll need is in those textbooks, or that one textbook. But it was really amazing to see the improvement of the students in their grades, just using this textbook, and it's it's free.
And yeah, I'm glad you brought the books, Doug, because it's easy to overlook the value of being able to print and be able to be able to review material not just when you're on a screen, and also as Kaylee Cruz pointed out in the chat, unlike a PDF where you can't do much with it without like dissection tools, if you have access to the Pressbooks platform, you easily make a copy, you clone it, it becomes your own. You add or reorder things that are necessary, or that's the beauty of this platform, that you don't have to reinvent it, and you can make it customize it to what you need for where you're teaching welding.
And
One of
there actually is a school that's done and I was surprised. I'm like, wow, this book's like barely out. And they did that. They customized it to their program.
Nice. They fixed our mistakes. Nice. Um,
Yeah.
one thing that hasn't been mentioned that I really like about this is that every section of every chapter has its own URL,
Mhm.
which means a student can open it up on their phone and not crash their phone. They don't have to download 1,000 pages in order to look at it. It's not going to crash their browser. Um, I didn't appreciate it when I was setting up my Canvas course, with the textbook. But as soon as I figured out, oh, wait, it's very specific. This is going to be very helpful to our students. So that's another big selling point right there.
And I
And then,
don't, oh, go ahead.
oh, I was going to say, I can also go over some additional material, but if there's any questions or anything like, um,
Yeah, if Doug or David, if you want to pick some more some favorite spots that you'd like to share, that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
um,
yeah, and while he's finding out, I was wondering, David, you mentioned, and it didn't occur to me till you brought it up, is like, um, was there was there an interest in the use of video in some of this? I know it's a thing to consider as to where it's valued and may it come in, but like being able to see some of the how things are done might have been something that you thought about.
Doug, I know we at least discussed putting videos in here. Did we
Yeah,
do?
I think Carl, I'm looking for it right now. Carl does have a link to a video or two in the GTAW, gas tungsten arc welding section. And if I recall correctly, it's how to feed the filler metal with the left hand or with your offhand. I'm looking for that video right now, but I know there's at least one video in, here it is. Let me screen share real quick. I'm going to replace whoever's, I think Dave, you're sharing right now. Let me hijack you for a second. So yeah, this is section 11.3, chapter 11, section 3. And there is a link to a YouTube video right here. And okay, this one's on electrode classification. I think there's more than one video embedded in the text. So hopefully that answers that question. I'm going to quit sharing.
David, did you have something that you wanted
Oh,
to share?
yeah. So we okay. Let's see. So kind of looking at the left, like I mentioned, like that safety and the equipment and the welding machines, shop tools and equipment. Actually, might as well click here. So on this one, you didn't write this, did you, Doug? Um,
No, none of the stuff I wrote was related to welding, actually.
okay. So we so like these are just I guess some images from the internet just kind of introducing, but we wanted to have images of the actual tools. And so I just kind of wanted to point that out that especially when you have students who aren't familiar with, the different types of, even just measuring equipment that's out there, that they can actually see it there. So, again, even a cartoon image and then the actual thing that's there. Um, and then if we go through another one, so then we have our processes. We even have different cutting processes. But then towards the back, then we start, weld identification, blueprints, and welding symbols. Um, so, that's very important. Like, I'm sure everyone hears from industry partners, like our students need to know math, students need to know how to read a blueprint. Students need to know how to show up on time. There's all different things, that our students need to do when they're out there working. One thing that I did kind of want to point out, and this is probably when I wrote this chapter on welding codes, I kind of did it like I started teaching like right at the beginning of the pandemic. And what I tried to do when I was teaching, since we couldn't take the students out to go visit different companies for tours and things like that, I really wanted to emphasize what else was out there because really the students who were welding were just in their booths, and the welding environment is different no matter where you go. And so for us here in Washington State, we have the Washington Association of Building Officials. But when I go through these codes, even like the history of codes, which is before this, to kind of just really emphasize the fact that a lot of these codes the way I was taught is that they're were written in the blood of people who were injured or killed. And so they're there for a reason. Your welding procedure is there for a reason. And so even when I go through a lot of the metallurgy and things like that, I say if there's anything you get out of this class is to make sure you follow the welding procedure. Those temperatures are there for a reason. So you have the properties that are needed for the material for the weld. Uh, One of the worst things you can do in terms of metal properties to a piece of metal is weld it, right? You're putting all that heat and we have post-weld heat treatments and other things that we do. But that it's very important for safety that, when the public is out, when they drive over a bridge or they walk into a building, they're not expecting for the thing to collapse. They have an expectation that they're going to go home, the same way that they left in the morning. But with codes, because codes can be a very dry subject. But with welding codes, I wanted to emphasize not only how do you qualify, to to a code, but also what's it used for. And so for the Weibo, which is a building code, is based off D11 for those who aren't familiar with it. We talk about the uses in industry, and then Weibo's more of a structural, but kind of talking about the different things that you can get qualified on are kind of listed out here. Let me go to another one actually. So if we go to even AWS, what I tried to do was discuss yeah, what they're used for in industry. And even I'll discuss, so out here in Seattle we have uh shipbuilding, and so for cruise ships and for our ferries and other things like that. And a lot of times different welding codes will work together. And so we've had students tell us, yeah, I'm working on uh repairing ferries or and whatnot. And so you have the American Bureau of Shipping there. For the structural portion of it, you have American Welding Society codes. And then if there's any boilers or any pressure piping or things like that, you're gonna have ASME boiler and pressure vessel code there. So kind of trying to emphasize that that's what's there. And what I'm hoping to do is, so I give kind of an overview of this, but then to also kind of have pictures that, hey, this is, because AWS, D15 is the bridge welding code. And so, here an image of the, famous Tacoma Narrows Bridge, but, they made another one, put that next to it. And then let's see. Yeah, so then, and images of the different positions, for qualification. Um, when they're actually doing their plate. This was an example that we found out of D11 where all the different specimens are cut out of. And it kind of, and then even like the testing. So like bend testing, this was an example, and coming out with the different specimens there. And then an image of what one looked like that or here's from the Federal Highway Administration. So not only just a cartoon, but again an image so they could actually see what it looks like. Images of root and face bend. Then we have our fillet weld. So all these things that students are going to encounter, actually there in the lab or when they're testing, they can get a good idea of it before they go out and work on it. And then I really like this picture. So this is a macro etch. So you cut, this is a T-joint here. So you have a piece of steel here being welded onto this one here. And so when you put an acid on it, so you polish it and then you put an acid on it, and it really brings out the grain structure. You can see, heat affected zones in here and things like that. And so I think this really kind of brings home the, hey, the WPS and saying, these temperatures are important and whatnot, like they can see a visual of, oh, yeah, if my heat input was higher, this heat affected zone would be, bigger, and you can kind of see the grain structure in here, things like that.
Such a great, the imagery does so much for this book. Like, even as a non-welder, I forget the chapter. My favorite one was the one with the big pipelines.
Oh yeah, that let's see. That's one that I was trying to. Okay, so that would be
I remember I had it
I think
bookmarked.
that's welding in the field, isn't it?
that might be I know I had an image for API, like I don't know if this was it, but the welding in the field
Yeah.
might, I don't know, Doug, if you want to show that chapter.
Sure. Another one of my favorite chapters because I wrote it. Um, I'm only half facetious in that. So yeah, there's a section on cross-country pipelines.
Yeah.
So yeah, one thing I don't think I mentioned is, why is the steel pipe green? It's because it's well watered. No, it's actually an epoxy coating to protect it from rust and corrosion. So yeah, we've we've got a section just specifically on pipeline welding, which is considered to be a specialty in the welding field. There are people that can weld, and then there are pipe welders. And
Yeah, that's it.
if you're a pipe welder, you are basically a cut above, because it is much more difficult physically because of the constantly changing geometry of how you have to do it. But yeah, there's a lot of cool pictures in here, and of course they're all credited and legally obtained and so forth.
So we've got some good questions coming in, and I wanted to throw these your way. And I'm not sure, maybe Ashley, maybe Doug or David, you can all contribute a little to this. Someone's wondering, how many hours did it take to actually create the book? And the reason they're asking that is because, like at their institution, the biggest challenge is for the authors of OER to be given time to actually work on something like this.
I think I figured out the time I spent and the rate of pay. I think I was making $1 an hour when it was all said and done. No, we worked on this for 18 months. We had 6 months of training and preparation, and then we worked on it for 18 months. I want to say I spent probably 10 hours a week working on the book over the course of that time frame. So it was involved, and everybody's going to work at a different pace.
Sure.
I've got ADD, so I probably spent 10 hours for an hour of productivity. Just saying.
That's the reality of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, your mileage may vary.
Maybe Jen, we could flash up that slide that shows all the contributors to the project, because that kind of fits in.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can put that up.
Yeah, that actually leads into something I wanted to mention, which is I think we recognize that Open Washington ProfTech is a really great team, and you have like support structures that maybe other people don't have. It's structured, it's lots of processes in place to make sure things happen. So I guess I'm wondering, for the people that are wondering, do you have any advice for somebody who's considering adapting the text, or maybe starting an OER project on a vocational subject area? Like any advice about how to approach it?
I also want to add that we did receive funding from the Department of Education to create 6 textbooks. So this is just one of 6 textbooks. So we were able to pay our authors outside of their regular job. So this was a contracted work with each of the authors to create content for these textbooks. So I know for some that's not very feasible, because we did have that extra funding. We had funding to be able to do copy and line editing. We had funding to do like quality assurance. I was able to go in and do a lot of work in the textbooks to make sure that all the links worked. And we had a migrator move the content from Google Docs into Pressbooks. So it takes a lot of time to create a textbook. So like it's a
And
lot of planning
yeah.
too.
And there was Ashley sent out a really great announcement on the CCCOER Google group, or listserv, as I call it. So I'm just sharing the instructions about how to join that listserv, because a lot of that kind of information is shared there. And also it's a great place to ask questions and get feedback and answers from other people that are actively, working on projects. But I was so excited to see that announcement that those 6 textbooks were
Oh, me
ready.
too. I
Yes.
was so excited to send it out on Friday, because people have been asking for the textbooks, and I was just waiting to make sure that everything was good. And like I said, they all went through a quality assurance process to make sure that everything is good to go. We also checked the accessibility of the textbooks. So the 2 versions that are available, PDF to print and PDF to download, are accessible. So we went through everything to do our due diligence everything is good to go and be sent out. I'm trying to paste it in the chat, um, but it's not letting me to share the other textbooks, but I'll be trying to do on that. But yeah.
Okay. And I guess, you know, as a librarian, this I just keep going back to this question because I know what it's like to try to support people that are actively wanting to, you know, start an OER project, but they don't know where to start. And let's say they don't have a support team, like Doug and David, you had. Just even if it's a simple, something simple about how to get started. Um, do you have any thoughts or advice for somebody that might be looking to start a project now that you've been through this whole process, um, which is really a feat in itself?
I think there was a lot of planning that went into it, and even just the training that we had at the beginning for accessibility. And some of the interesting things about accessibility were that some things to make it accessible for one set of people and their need, or one set of needs, conflicts with other sets of needs, and so working through all of that. But yeah, we did have people who were very familiar professionals with that to help out. But I think in terms of uh, the group of the welding instructors, really kind of having an open discussion about not only the different topics that we wanted to cover, but do we think we can do that in the time frame that's allotted, and kind of just asking, do we want a co-author for every chapter, or do we want to do these individually? And I think we kind of decided to do the chapters individually, but if anyone needed any help, we would reach out and work with the team, had regular meetings that were set up uh, by the state board and things like that. So I would say, communication, and I think really like everyone's opinion, was valued and in our discussions, um, and it really helped, generate the product, this final product, just help from everybody and working well together.
You know, Dr. Bo-Young Che, we're gonna give the mic over to you because I'd love to hear a little bit of feedback about like the next phases of the project. Can we get Dr. Che a
Yes,
mic?
I will hand over the mic right now.
Great.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity for our faculty authors and our team. And I'm just thrilled to be able to hear and just feel so honored to share this moment. So about your earlier question regarding how to begin this work. So what I would add to that question is I would recommend just starting somewhere. I mean, if we wait for the perfect funding team or support system, it will be really difficult to move forward. You can begin by drafting a rough outline of your textbook or setting preliminary goals and sketching a possible chapter structure. And that foundation, with that can help you invite your colleagues to brainstorm, and maybe over time project will grow and reach its full potential with an opportunity. I'm saying this because a lot of our faculty authors who have joined this project either through the first phase or the second phase, they have begun their work years before this grant opportunity. So by the time they were joining, they already had a very clear idea of the textbook that they would like to author. And some of them even had fully developed like table of contents, or some of them were actually halfway through. So I would say go ahead and begin your work somewhere and then nurture it to grow and find your partners, and opportunity will one day knock. So that would be a bit of recommendation I wanted to offer. Did you have any other questions?
Thank you so much, Dr. Shea. That's really something I think we need to remind ourselves is that we need to, like you said, nurture and start somewhere and don't get frozen
Mm-hmm.
with the large task at hand. Thank you so
Mm-hmm.
much for that input. That's really helpful.
Thank you.
Alan also shared our project manual that has had, I don't know if this is the updated one, but that also is a really good place to start as well. It goes through every single aspect of the project. So that's a really good place to start as well. There's been a lot of hours that has gone into that project manual, lessons learned from grant 1 to grant 2. So you could start there if you're
Yeah.
thinking about creating a textbook.
Totally. So that project manual, beyond the textbooks that we have authored, it's another contribution, our contribution to the open education. It has about, I forgot the total number of pages actually. It not by now should have about 61 pages that has practical steps that everything that you need to self-publish your open textbooks or as a team. It has the guidelines for citation, how to deal with all types of media, and how to work on the formatting, accessibility, and even plagiarism. All of the possible practical steps that you would need to run a publication house for the open textbooks are there. So it is our all of the compilation of lessons learned, and we are hoping that it will become a helpful asset for anyone who wanted to start a open textbook publication project, either as a team or individually.
That's such a valuable contribution. Hello, Bo Young. A lot of organizations that do projects like this share like these how-to that guide us. I know BC Campus does a lot, and I think eCampus Ontario, and probably many others. And that's a very valuable part of having that.
Thank you.
Wow, I want to learn to weld though. Should I sign up for a class, Doug?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you'll be on a waiting list. Our program's full right now.
But I know, and it can be overwhelming when you see like, oh my gosh, this took so much and so many people. But again, the beauty of the OER is that, there's so many open textbooks out there that you can leverage that. Look, the Pressbooks directory, if you don't know that, I mean, that's the first place I go to find resources. And if you have Pressbooks, you say, I like that one. I want to tweak it, and no reason to start over from scratch.
So I just wanted to, thank you everyone. This was an incredible conversation. We've got 1 minute left. And so I'm going to stay on the call after this is done and after we stop the recording. If other folks want to stay, if you have more questions, we'll see who's able to stay. I just wanted to throw up this last slide. And if anybody has questions to direct you their way. So David and Doug have graciously given their email addresses if you wanted to follow up with questions for them about the text. If you have questions about Pressbooks, you can let me know. One of the things that I wanted to invite folks to do, if you are on this call and you are already part of the Pressbooks community and you're publishing things that you're really proud of, please shoot me an email about it, whether it's for future sessions like this. We love sharing things out on our LinkedIn. I just love to know about the cool things that our community is doing. And I know somebody did have a question about the type of Pressbooks instance that was used to create this. So we can answer that after at the end of the call. Somebody else from the Pressbooks team is on and has agreed to answer that. But I just wanted to thank everybody so much for coming. I don't know if anybody has any last words.
And certainly if we're Jen and I are looking always for new Pressbooks to pop the hood on, and we take suggestions. We're looking tentatively for our next one. We've been talking about going to the UK and looking at some exciting titles from Ireland and University of Leeds, but we're just always interested because there's too many Pressbooks to look at. It's a lot to take in. So we need your help in knowing what ones you like.
Yeah, every time I go to the Pressbooks directory, there's like a bunch of
Yeah.
new ones published.
Yeah.
And just a quick note, CCCOER, we have monthly webinars. So I'm posting again the link to our webinars for the rest of the fall season. So if you're interested, please check out the descriptions.
And a big thank you to Doug, David, and Ashley for joining us and taking us for a ride.
Well, thank you. The honor's mine.
Thank you for just sharing our textbook. Makes me really happy to see this out in public. It's a like a surreal moment. I'm sure Doug and David also feel the same way when they saw this live and also saw the physical copy of all their work and hours in one thing. It's really nice to be able to see it come out and for everyone to see it as well.
Great job to all of you and to the whole team at Open Washington ProfTech and everybody involved. Great job.